Welcome to VIR. This is one of the NNJR trackside classroom series that we now do on YouTube in advance of events. And we hope to have some at the track discussion about these topics or anything else that you want to talk about VIR. So let's dive in. This session is really targeted for advanced drivers, although students, you may pick up some items here, but my target is going to be those of you with some experience. And in particular, I want you to think about maybe a time where you had something happen that you weren't expecting. Maybe it was mechanical, maybe it was something on the track, maybe another car did something you didn't expect. And I want you to think about that because as we graduate from student groups and start to drive solo, we generally know how to drive the track. We know what to do when the conditions are what we expect. But today we're going to talk about how to deal with the unexpected. And so I want you to think a little bit about, a big surprise you've either experienced on track or heard about. And think a little bit about whether you've ever thought consciously about, that kind of worst case scenario. So with that kind of to get you started, let's dive right into the PowerPoint and get us going. So as I said, this is our trackside classroom series. We have the normal disclaimer here that anything you do based on this is on your own responsibility. So there's, two cars behind you, but you only see one of them. Or there's a fast car approaching, but you're too busy chasing the car in front. You come up on a heavy braking zone and all of a sudden there's oil. How do we get prepared for these kinds of situations? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about escape hatches. We're going to talk about what situational awareness really is. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how to plan for the unexpected, how to make sure we have the basics in place, and then some very concrete and specific ways that you can develop and improve your ability to survive, something unexpected. Now, I have to start with this great quote from Rick By. He says, most drivers don't realize they're only a heartbeat away from disaster. And if you think about how fast most of us are driving on track, even if we're not on the ragged edge, we're still going fast. There's a lot of hard things not very far from us. If something goes wrong, could be pretty bad. And you're going to hear this like a broken record today, but I like the way he puts it. I'm amazed at how slowly most drivers react. He says when something happens, it's time to slow down, not now, but right now. I mean, immediately, instantly. And we're going to hammer on that today because that's really, really important. Now, when we think about escape hatches, if something, goes wrong, there are ways we can recover from some issues on track, but oftentimes we have to go off track. Now, if we make a mistake on track, we have an escape hatch. This works best if you're early or too fast into a corner and realize it early. Then we can simply relax the hands, right? And brake in a straight line. And this works as long as there's not another car in the way. Or now if there's oil on the track, it still works, except now we're probably going to go off into the grass. But bailing out early is really, really important. And this is one way to keep yourself on the track if there's room to do it. And not enough people think in these terms. So please start to think about adding this to your repertoire. Now, of course, off track, there's runoff areas. And the good news at VIR is most turns have a lot of room. but not as much. Turn one has some room, but it's also downhill. Turns 4 and 5, there's not a lot of room there, but they're not real fast corners either. And if we think about the corners at the end of the back straight, 13, 14, 15, if we go off there, we're going to go downhill. Yeah, there's a lot of real estate, but we're going to go downhill and probably gain some speed. And the key thing, back to the Rick By quote here, is, reacting and taking advantage of these escape hatches only works if we realize early that we need to do something and we act. We react. We take action quickly. So the basics, we're going to dive into some of the basics here. Do you even know where all these escape hatches are, all these runoff areas? Do you know how to use them? Are you prepared? The hard part, deciding to do it quickly, and that's what we're going to try to improve your skill and mine at with this discussion. Now, we're going to talk about situational awareness, and we're going to talk about reaction time. So here's kind of a definition of situational awareness, which I apologize if this is a little basic, but it's important, I think, to set the stage here. It starts with how far ahead are we looking? How far ahead can we see? How early can we see each flag station? Do we have our eyes up? Are we glancing as far ahead as possible? And I use the term glance here because we're not focused, most of the time we're not focused as far up as we can see, but we do want to glance up there. And are we aware of, is our vision showing us what's different on the track surface? If the track surface is different this time than last time, that ought to immediately set off a loud alarm bell. We also need to think about how wide our vision is, because our peripheral vision shows us pull off and run off spots and where there's room. That's not where we're focused when we're driving, or at least I certainly hope not. But our peripheral vision, our wide vision, we need to be able to pick those areas up. And then it comes down to how sensitive are our senses. Obviously, oil and antifreeze are things we don't want to experience on the track, but they do happen. And we may be able to pick them up with our eyes, or we may not, but we may well be able to pick them up with our nose. Especially antifreeze can have a distinctive smell. Less so oil, or if there's that much oil, then that's a lot of oil. But nonetheless, our nose is an important tool. And then last but not least, how well do you know yourself? Are you consistent on track or inconsistent? Are you focused or distracted on this run? Are you bothered by traffic or certain kinds of traffic? And at the moment, are you driving within yourself, or are you chasing somebody so the red mist isn't far away? So think of these as the basics of situational awareness that we need to develop and we need to get better at if we're going to be safer on track. And then the last dimension of situational awareness that I want to emphasize is, I'm going to use an analogy that Keith Code used in his great driving book called The Twist of the Wrist. And he talks about drivers having $10 worth of attention or focus. And so if you think of that, is you have $10 to spend when you're driving. So if you're a student, you're spending most of that time on reference points, some on braking, occasionally looking at the gauges. There's not a lot left over if something goes wrong, right? Now, hopefully, if you're an advanced driver, then you're not spending a lot of your $10 on reference points. You're spending some on the car feel, you're some on braking, and so on, and so that there's something left over. This is what we should all strive to be able to do. Of course, the more seat time that you have, the more time, more of your $10 is left for traffic, flags, runoff room, and so on. And of course, if you race, you know that when you're racing, you have to have a lot of your $10 left for racing strategy. And if you've ever watched the pros race, I'm constantly amazed, for example, watching the F1 drivers driving at the ragged edge and discussing race strategy calmly with their pits while they're changing the adjustments on the steering wheel in advance of every corner. Those drivers, they have $9.99 of their $10 left for other things besides the basics of driving. None of us are that good, but we can strive to have more available. So how do we improve our reaction time? Well, we start by thinking about what's the worst that could happen. Somebody spills oil in front of us, or a car spins, or something goes wrong with our car. And then we want to make sure that doesn't happen. And we do that by, first of all, paying attention, which, as Ross Bentley points out here, even experienced drivers don't do enough of. And we factor in how far we're really willing to push. If everything isn't right, it's probably not the time to go out and set your personal best, that sort of thing. But how do we plan for the unexpected? Well, the obvious: know where to drive off in each corner, look at each flag station as early as possible, glance far ahead, like I said before, be hyper aware of traffic, and I'll provide a tip later on how you can learn to do that or improve doing that. Pay a lot of attention to your ears and nose, and I'll explain why in a minute. And stay focused. Ross Bentley, suggests having a trigger word. It could just be as simply as focus, or eyes up, or pay attention, dummy. Whatever works for you, but a trigger so that if you are on track and realize you're not paying as much attention as you should, you can say to yourself, pay attention, dummy, and get back in the groove. So here's a basic, and I talked about baselines before. I'm going to emphasize it again. You have to have that baseline, that clear mental picture of what the flag stations look like in a normal circumstance. And that means not only when we drive past them, but as soon as we can see them from a distance. Also, that clear mental picture of what the normal track surface looks like. And at VIR, that gets tricky early in the day and late in the day, because part of the track is in shadow. And so things can really sneak up on us. First of all, we should be aware that when it's in shadow, all of a sudden, especially later in the day, the grip isn't going to be the same as when the sun was on it earlier in the day. In the morning, that part of the track isn't going to warm up as fast. But more importantly, to this point here, is those shadows can hide things, and we need to be aware of that. We want to be very aware of the car, what it sounds like, what it feels like, and of course, the traffic around us. And any difference from this normal baseline is an alarm. It's a warning, because something isn't quite right. It's no time to focus on going as fast as possible. It's time to figure out what, in fact, isn't normal. So here's several ways that you and I can improve our skills in this area. First is visualization. Just as you're thinking about driving a track, and I hope, and I know many of you do visualize in advance of going to a track, or overnight, even when you're at the track, how to drive the track, what the line is, what your reference points are. Well, as part of that, visualize where you would drive off if you got into turn one and the brakes didn't work nearly as well as you thought they would. What would you do to bail out? How would you drive off? Visualize seeing each flag station as you go around the track, and part of that is just looking far ahead. You can visualize the traffic around, not just you're driving on an empty track, but visualize driving when you've got cars in front and behind. You can visualize paying attention to your ears and what the normal sounds are like, and what the normal smells like or not. And again, that trigger phrase. Now, here's an interesting tip we can use on the traffic, thanks to Ross Bentley. A way to work on our ability to be more aware of and more comfortable with, frankly, traffic around us. So we're driving on the highway. Many of us are in New Jersey or other areas where there's lots of traffic. If we're on the highway, we can look at the 4 cars closest to us, front, back, and sides, and say their colors out loud: a black one, a gray one, a green one, and a white one. And then a couple minutes later, when they're not right next to you, try to recall their car colors and their positions. The black car was in front, the white car was behind, and so on. This is a great mental exercise to improve our ability to get comfortable with traffic around us and register it faster. And by the way, it won't hurt your driving safety on the road either. Now, you've all heard me talk about sensory input sessions, and Ross Bentley talk about those. I'm going to talk about them here specifically to help us be safer and give ourselves an out. And the Sherlock Holmes quote here, which Ross Bentley brought in, is great, because sensory input sessions really are all about observing. Sherlock Holmes quote, "There's a major difference between seeing and observing." So, one sensory input session can be just paying attention to the track surface. What's it look like? Obviously, is what does it smell like? Can obviously pay same kind of attention to the car. And I'm emphasizing here, listening and smell, because they can obviously be a sign that something's not right. But also the way our brains work, our brains process sounds and smells much faster than they do vision, what we see. And so, if you hear something that's not normal or smell something that's not normal, you're going to know it instantly. You're going to know it even before you see it. And so don't discount that. Pay attention. So deliberate practice, sensory input that you've heard me talk about. I'm not going to go into the depth here, but this is going out on the track with a specific purpose of paying attention to to one topic. And that could be reference points and so on related to the track. As you see here, including, safety features like escape hatches. It could be, dealing with traffic and what would I do if, making sure I'm really good with the mirrors. And then the basics of sensory input, which are getting better, improving our vision, improving our feel, improving our hearing, improving our smell. Now, to help you with that, I've provided some deliberate practice worksheets. The links here that you can download them. And, these are just a track map with some of the questions, like in this example that I've put here. What would I do if I smell antifreeze? What would I do if the car in front swerves under braking? What would I do if the brake pedal goes soft, and so on? So these are here, for you to print out, and I hope you pick one or two or more, but at least one or two, to try to improve your ability to read what's happening on track. And finally, in this area of tips and ways that we can get better, is focus. Ross talks about making a habit before going on the track, while you're waiting and staging, tightening belts or so on, to create that trigger phrase. It could be hyper aware, it could be focus, could be wake up dummy. Tie that back to your visualization, and then think about, what are the weather conditions? Are they likely to change? Do I know all the drivers in the group? Am I feeling in the zone or not? Have I done anything to the car? And what might have changed on track before last time? These are examples of things that if we just kind of run through a quick checklist for 30 seconds while we're waiting to go on track, we're going to improve our ability we're going to improve our sensitivity rather to what's happening around us and give ourselves more reaction time in case something goes wrong. So in summary, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond. And in the case of on track, if something bad happens, we have to respond very fast. Developing situational awareness is an essential skill. That's all the things you know: traffic, flags, track condition, and the car. And I've provided here some skills that you can work on to improve your reaction times. It starts with that mental baseline, but we can improve our reaction time by visualizing, by getting better at reading and being aware of the traffic around us, by using sensory input and deliberate practice, and by having that trigger focus word to help us be sharp when we get on track. Okay, with all of that, I'd like to thank you for watching. And if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer them either VIR or via email. At this point, I'm going to pause, and then we're going to do a lap around, well, not a lap around, we're going to do a turn by turn at VIR. I strongly encourage you to print out the track map from a VIR that's on the website, and actually print out several of them and make notes on them when you come in from each section. If you're new to VIR, then print it out and study it so that you know the turn numbers and names. You'll see, at VIR, the names that you'll hear are, you won't hear horseshoe from very many people. You will hear NASCAR. You will certainly hear snake, which is the section not even labeled here, but this section here. And you'll certainly hear climbing S's, South Bend, Oak Tree, and occasionally roller coaster and hog pen. But the turn numbers are important to know for obvious reasons. So with all of that said, we're going to shift gears, and we're going to talk about VIR turn by turn. So let me get that up here. Give it a moment to show up. Okay, here we go. So VIR, famous old track, long track. Our normal disclaimer of, use your own judgment. I don't have a passing zone map here, so let me just talk about where the passing zones are in student groups. The front straight is obviously a passing zone. All passing is on the right side. This information will be in the track pack, by the way, but all passing on the right side. There is passing allowed between 1 and 2, actually between 1 and 3 in this section here. It could be on either side. Most people are going to give a pass on the left in this area. Same between NASCAR and 4, between 3 and 4, passing on the left. These are short zones, but believe it or not, you can send a car around. The next passing area is the long chute, after the snake, before the climbing S's. And this passing is mandatory on the left in this section. So all passing on the left in this section. And certainly you can send at least 1 and often 2 or even 3 cars around here. The next passing zone is between 10 and 11. This is an awkward passing zone because the line crosses the track. So you'll want to work with your instructor on that. And then, of course, the main back straight is a long straight. All passing is on the left. All passing is on the left. Even immediately exiting where you might think, I want to give a pass on the right, don't do it. Track out, move the car to the right side of the track and give the pass on the left. We have the mandatory sides because if we don't do that, we've seen cases of drivers crisscrossing at very high speeds, and it becomes very dangerous. Not a good idea. If you want to know more about VIR turn by turn, we have a complete written document on the website. It's hopefully pretty consistent with what I'm going to cover here, but please take a look at that as well. So we enter the track. You want to make sure you watch staging and pit out. They will let you out on the track. Pit when we pit out here, we pit out right in the back in the latter part of the front straight. Cars are going a ton. We must stay all the way track right, all the way to the apex of turn one. So speaking of turn one, here it is, 180-degree plus corner. If you look, you will see that the front half is tighter than the back half. So it's a heavy brake, and it's a slow corner. So the line is pretty much what you'd expect, except that we probably aren't going to use the full width of the track on exit because the track comes back. And so let's take a look at that. So here's the braking zone for turn one. Guess what? It's downhill. There's not a lot of leftover track at turn one past the turn in point. So we really want to get our braking done early here. It's not a place to brake late. There's a little bit of help around the 2 marker where the track rises slightly. That'll help slow the car down some, but otherwise turn one is totally flat. There is no banking to help us. So it's a case where, again, the deck is stacked against us. It's a slow corner. We need to slow down. Here you see the turn in arrow on the left, and that works for most drivers. And we want to turn and run right along the apex curb for quite a long distance. In fact, we just want to hug that curb all the way to the end of it. And the reason is that it's a long corner, and we have to get quite a ways around before we can think about getting on the gas to do anything more than maintain the speed that we have. So if we can't use any acceleration until we get to the end of this curve. Here you see why we don't use the whole track at track out. You can see that the track actually comes back after turn one. So it effectively makes this substantially sharper than a 180-degree turn. And so most people are going to track out mid-track and then look for and look up track to turns 2 and 3. So notice the direction of the slide here. I'm matching the track map. We've gone through turn one. Now we're coming back. So the line here goes from top to bottom of the slide. So the way we drive from the exit of turn one to the turn in at turn 3 is one arc. And you can see it's a pretty gentle arc, almost looks like a straight line on the slide. It's not straight, but it can be driven as an arc on the gas. This is a place where we can accelerate quite briskly. And it is a passing zone, as I said before, on the left. As we're exiting turn one and we start to head up the middle of the track, we want to be paying attention to these trees on the left. And it's hard to see here because it's kind of hidden by the trees, but the tech barn, which is the small building, as opposed to the tower building here or the food stand building, both of which are larger, we're looking for the small building. And as we come past the trees, now you can see it more clearly. But as soon as you see it coming through the trees, just drive right toward it. It's a perfect reference and puts us right where we want to be headed into turn 3. The apex of turn 2 is not critical. Some people stay wide and make the arc slightly wider, and some people just go right past the apex like is shown here. Either one's fine, but we want to get to track right entering turn 3. So the curbing we were aiming for when we were aiming at the tech shed is this right side curb that we want to run along. We're going to brake coming into this, and we want to run along this, and we're going to turn at the end of that curb for turn 3, also known as NASCAR. Relatively fast corner, but we've been going pretty quick. We've been on the gas. That's why we have to brake coming in here. So The brake zone, is before the car is in this photo, but we're still on the brakes as we approach the turn-in point here. And we're going to turn in right at the end of that curbing on the right. And we're going to run right along the apex of 3 for 10 or 15 feet. You're going to hear that on a number of corners. It's not, the apex isn't a point, it's a distance that we drive along. And you see we have a short chute in front of us that leads us over to turn, they call it turns 4A and 4B, left-hand turn being 4A, the right-hand turn being 4B. We compromise what we do in 4A to set up 4B in the section that follows. So we're braking for turn 4 because we can be on the gas hard through and through turn 3 and down the chute. And we're going to turn in, and instead of tracking out like you normally would, we're going to aim to have the car on the left side of the track here, or at least the left half of the track as we exit turn 4A. So in other words, we're going to apex the corner, but then we're not going to track out very far at all. We're going to go about 1 car length at, a car length and a half past the end of this curb, and then we're going to turn for 4B. So, as we exit 4A, we're really focused on the apex here of 4B. This is really critical to nail this apex, because from this point here, about where the car is in this photo, we're going to turn the wheel to the right and make 1 arc that's going to take us exactly where we want to go through 4B and to set up turn 5. So here you can see the sealer patch in this photo, where the line is, right? It's creating that arc that is going to set us up for 5A and 5B. But 5A is the critical part here, as I'll show in a moment. So here's that little tiny chute where we're driving that arc. That arc is going to take us to the outside of the track here. We don't want to get, completely to the outside curbing, but we want to be up almost against it as we approach turn 5. Now we can see the apex of 5A here, and this becomes our focus. We may need to adjust the arc slightly, to get the car in there and to get it straight, as I'm going to show in a moment. Sometimes that means a breathe of the throttle or a little bit of steering adjustment, to make sure the arc is taking us where we want to be. The critical part here is when we're at the apex of 5A that you see here, we want to be looking at the bridge. It's hard to see in this photo, but the bridge that enters the track is in the middle of my highlight here. And we want the car looking at that bridge. If we're looking at the trees or to the left of the trees, we have not made the corner and we cannot get on the gas. So this is basically a heavy acceleration zone as soon as we get the car straight here. But if the car isn't straight, we can't get on the gas. And if we do get on the gas, we're going to be in trouble. So very important to get the car straight at this part of the track. Once we do, we can accelerate through the snake, and it's pretty straightforward. We do want to pay a lot of respect to the curb in turn 5B. It's a tall, nasty curb. If we hit it wrong, it's not going to do good things. The signature feature, or one of them anyway, of VIR, the climbing S's. And, turn numbers are sort of irrelevant here, but you can see it's a complex section. The key, or the way to make sure that you execute the climbing S's safely and quickly is the entry. And I'm going to emphasize how we do that in a moment. You see the entry line drawn here. So how do we do that? Well, as we approach the climbing S's, we've just gone under the bridge here that we talked about a minute ago. We're going to turn the car very gently to the left once we get to about the end of this road on the right ends. And we're just going to bend it. We're accelerating at this point. We're not going to brake. We're going to stay on the gas, and we're just going to bend the car slightly so that we can, go straight along this curbing on the left. And I want you to pay a special attention to the white line and the fact that the white line is straight past the curb here. We're going to drive right along that white line. We're going to follow that white line. We're not going to turn until the end of that white line. And so that's about here in this photo. And the reason we do that is there's a hill on this next S. And if we do what we just described, we hit that hill square on, and the car feels good, lots of grip. We can be on the gas, everything's nice. If we're not lined up that way and we hit the hill at an angle, sooner or later, that's going to cause a problem, especially if we try to go too fast. So it's very important to get this first section done properly. Once we do that, this section is just a blast because we're going to apex kind of the end of this 8A curb that you see here. And then we're going to aim kind of the middle or second half of the 8B curb on the left, and then the middle of the curb on turn 9 at the top. There's a great rhythm through here, and it is very fast, which makes it both fun but extremely challenging and deserves a great deal of respect. So immediately after turn 9 comes South Bend, turn 10, the fastest corner on the track, and in my view, the most dangerous corner on the track if it's not driven correctly. So how do we drive South Bend? Well, first, as we exit turn 9, there's a little bit of a rise, and then the road settles down, which is where the car is in this photo. As soon as the car settles down coming over that rise, we want to use the brakes. This is going to be somewhere between a brush brake and a light brake, depending on how much horsepower you have, how fast you're going. But the key thing here is we're going to brake in a straight line. We're not going to brake at all, after we turn in for this corner. So we want to get the braking done in a straight line so that when we turn in, which our turn in is as soon as we can see the beginning of the apex curb, we want to be getting our foot on the gas pedal. Not on the floor, but we want enough gas to settle the car, and so that the car is settled and we can manage the line through the corner. This is a very fast corner. This is a case for slow hands to turn the car into a fast corner, and it's a case we're using light brake release and initially light gas to balance the car, get it set up, and eventually squeeze the gas pedal to keep it planted. The apex here is the early part of the curb. One of the nasty things about turn 10 is that it goes off camber, right where you'd like to have more banking at track out. And you can almost see that in this photo, that it does go off camber. So that catches people out if they're not paying attention. If we stay on the right line and we manage the gas properly, this corner is a lot of fun. If you ever do get in trouble, just drive it off. There's a huge field on the right here. There's all kinds of room to drive off. The mistake people make in this corner is they get in too fast or too early, and they, instead of driving off, they lift. And then you hit the tire wall that's over here, and you hit it hard. So, because you're going so fast here. So lots of room to drive off, a lot of fun to drive. Most people who make that mistake are not students, but that's why this corner deserves great respect. Now, another signature complex at VIR, Oak Tree, turns 11 and 12. And notice how the second half, turn 12, is tighter than the first half. So that means we can carry some speed through 11. We then have to brake to set up for 12 for Oak Tree itself. So we have a nice brake zone and into a hill. So we don't have to brake as much as we think coming into 11 because it is relatively quick and this hill is going to slow us down anyway. So we turn in, kind of at the middle or a little bit past the middle of the curb. The key thing here is to have the eyes up and focused on this curbing on the outside of 12, because we want the car lined up alongside this curb. And ideally, we're going to be on some brake here, not heavy, but enough brake to help the car turn, because this is a very sharp turn, very slow turn. This is a case of fast hands. Once we get to where we want to turn, we need to crank the wheel. This is a sharp turn. And we're going to crank the wheel and be patient to get on the gas, because again, it's a sharp corner. The car takes some time to turn, and we have to give it that time. The key thing here, by the time we're approaching the apex, like you see here, we need to be looking at this flag station. If we're still looking over here, then we haven't turned enough. If we're looking here or to the right, great. Now we can begin to feed on some gas and accelerate. This is an extremely challenging complex, but very rewarding when you get it right. Track out is the last half of the curve here. Okay, now notice again direction. Now we're going from the left of the slide to the right. This is, the roller coaster at the end of the back straight. And we're going to see another compromised corner here. We're going to compromise 14 to set up 15. But what does that look like? First, this is the braking zone at the end of the back straight. And notice the hill. Again, that helps us slow down. But the road does turn, or bend, I should say, left, at the top of this hill here. And for that reason, as we get about to this point, we just gently turn the car, not much at all, and certainly not enough that should affect what we're doing with the braking. The reason we do that is we want to be on the left half of the track as we come over that little rise to set up our turn for turn 14. Turn 14, we're going to just basically follow this curbing. We're going to pick up the curbing someplace early on. We're just going to follow it, because when we get to the end of it, that's where we're going to turn in for 15. This is another slow corner, and we have to be patient. But the nice thing, if we do this right, we get to this point, we just turn and go. We turn the car to the left, we start squeezing the gas, and away we go, because this compression here you see in front of us when the road flattens out really sticks the car down. And yes, we're going to apex the middle of the curb, but at this point, we got a ton of grip and we can accelerate down this chute that's in front of us. Now, this chute leads us to one of the most important complexes on the track, because this sets up the front straight. And this is 16A, 16B. And what you can't see on the slide here is that the road falls away dramatically here. From the point of 16A down past 16B, we're going down a very steep hill. Feels like the car is falling off the edge of the world at this point. So here's the outside turn-in curbing, if you want to think about it that way, for 16A at the end of that chute. So we're going to need to brake, but what we want to do is whether we may begin braking before we bend the car in for 16A, but we want to brake all the way up into this little rise that you see on the left here. There's a little rise there that can help slow us down. And we do have to slow down to set this complex up. Basically, what we want to do is follow the last half of the curbing on the left here. And again, we're compromising this turn to set up the one that follows. So we're going to follow this curbing to the end, and then we're going to turn. And here you can get a sense for how steep the hill is that we're navigating at this point. So we're going to turn in to the right at the end of this curbing that you see in the slide. And here's what it looks like going down the hill. There's the 16B apex. We're basically on the gas at this point, depending how much power you have. We're certainly going to be feeding gas on coming down the hill. As we get past 16B, we can feed on a lot of power. We do get compression that helps us here, but the road does come back. So if you have a high-powered car, you have to use the gas judiciously here until you can make sure there's enough road to use it. In a lower-powered car, we can be using most of the power pretty quickly through here. And it is important, as I said, it feeds onto the front straight. I don't have a great picture of 17. One note about 17 is that there's no need necessarily to be in on the apex on the right. Many drivers find it's just as comfortable to be a car width or so off that apex. But the track out curbings here at 16B and 17 are not that friendly. So they're not places we don't really want to use the last inch on the outside of these corners. A terrifically fun complex, once we get it right. So just some notes to summarize. Turn 1 is slower than it looks. So is Oak Tree. So is turn 4. You might pick up a theme here. Turn 10, South Bend deserves great respect. And these connected corners, like the complex that begins at 4, like the one at the end of the back straight, like the one that feeds onto the front straight, they require patience. There's a reason why we want to set it up, because we're setting up the fast section that follows. But if we get impatient, then we're going to screw that up. Look forward to seeing you at VIR. And please, if you have any questions or comments, you feel free to look me up at VIR. Feel free to send me an email. It's Gilbert, the number 4, at rcn.com. Everyone have a great day. I look forward to seeing you at VIR.